In those moments in my early grief, I felt like there's nobody else talking about it. I didn't want to make anybody else uncomfortable talking about it, so I suffered in silence. So I started to journal just to get those thoughts and the emotions on the paper. That was the one thing that really got me through that very tough time.
My guest today is Shannon Roane, a certified grief coach who is the voice behind Highlight Your Healing, which is a platform dedicated to helping women navigate grief and rediscover who they are after loss. Through faith, journaling, and honest conversations, Shannon creates a safe space for healing, reflection, and growth.
There are other things you can grieve, such as the loss of a job. And a lot of people currently are experiencing job loss, a health diagnosis. You can grieve your health because as far as you know, you will never be the same after that health diagnosis.
Shannon is someone who has walked through her own losses. She has a language for things that most people have only really thought of in private. And I think this conversation is going to give you the permission to stop pretending. There is so much pressure to be strong, to hold it together, to be okay, right? What do you want to say to the person who has been performing okay for so long that they don't even know how to stop?
Yeah, and what I like to call that is a functional griever. You're still doing all the things. You're going to work, you're showing up, you're fixing lunches, you're fixing dinner, you're keeping the household together. And as you continue to push on, it will show up in moments where you're least expecting it. I like to tell my clients to start by naming your grief because so many people don't know what they're actually grieving. They're grieving one thing, but it's layers. Grief has layers.
Oh my gosh, you're hitting such a nerve right now, Shannon. This is good. I have never really thought about it that way. I really have not. Oh, I feel like I'm going to cry here now. Okay. Okay, so hey guys, before we get started on today's episode, I want to set the stage. Every episode of Shifted on Purpose has been building towards something. We've talked about the practical side of grief, the documents, the paperwork, the to-do list that nobody warned you about. But today, we want to go somewhere different. Today, we go inside. Now, when most people hear the word grief, they immediately think about death. And I know that's a lot about what we talk about on this show. However, my guest today says grief is more than that. It's the relationship that ended, the career that shifted, the version of yourself that you had to let go of, the life you planned that didn't quite end up the way you thought it would. And all of that counts. Before we get into the work and your framework, I want to start somewhere personal. So, what brought you into this space beyond your bio? How did you get here?
My story started after a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, and I remember just sitting in the car. We were at CVS. I
Mm,
was waiting for the medicine, and I remember it was raining and just looking at the water drip down the window. And in that moment is when I realized things would be completely different from that day on.
mm,
That is what started my grief journey. I was in the parking lot at a CVS after having that emergency surgery, and I knew from that day on, my life had changed. That was my grief journey. 4 months after that, I lost my aunt
mm.
to cancer, and
Sorry to hear
6
that.
months after that, I had another pregnancy loss. So it was a back-to-back grief, and I knew in those moments that things would not be the same ever for me again, and that's what started my grief journey.
Oh, wow. Whew, that must be tough. I bet you're still working through it, right? Every day is different. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you talk about your own losses and the unexpected life shifts on your platform. Can you take us back to the moment that everything changed for you? Not the day itself, but the moment right after when everything hit you.
Yeah, so after, like I said, everything hit me, I knew in that moment that life wouldn't be the same. I felt like I suffered in silence. I didn't really talk about it. I would suppress the feelings, the emotions, sitting in my car on the way to work, at work, with the door closed, just completely breaking down. And that's when I knew I'm like, at the time, I didn't really have a name for it. I just knew I was sad all the time. I knew
Yeah.
that I had all of these emotions that I didn't really know how to get out. I didn't know who to talk to about it. Back then, I just felt like no one was really talking about grief. When you think about grief, you think about the loss of a loved one. But there's also other forms of grief. But just in those moments in my early grief, I felt like there's nobody else talking about it. I didn't want to make anybody else uncomfortable talking about it. So I suffered in silence.
Mm.
And journaling was the one thing, the one way where I felt like it was an outlet. So I started to journal just to get those thoughts and the emotions on a paper. That was the one thing that really got me through that very tough time.
Wow. That's great to hear that you at least found some creative outlet to get your emotions out. Journaling for some is very therapeutic, and I'm glad that you found that part for yourself. And, I sort of want to lead into what you said in your previous comment here, where you said grief comes in different forms, and truly, like I know you and I have talked offline before, and we say that grief, when people hear the word grief, that they immediately think about death, right? And I
Right.
know that you work with women who are grieving all kinds of loss, relationships, careers, identity. Can you just talk about that? Because I think there are people listening right now who don't even recognize what they are carrying as grief because nobody has told them that it counted, you know?
Right. Yeah. So most people, when they think about grief, they think about the loss of a loved one, right? And that's usually tied to a funeral. But there are other forms of grief. There are other things you can grieve, such as the loss of a job. And a lot of people currently are experiencing job loss. And most people don't
Yeah.
think about job loss being a form of grief. But if you think about it, this is the thing that you get up every morning,
Mm.
right? It's structured, it's routine, it's financial security, it's taking care of your family,
Mhm.
paying your bills, putting food on a table. And when that's gone, you find yourself,
Real
who
shift.
am I without this title?
Yeah,
Right? You
absolutely.
think about, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to pay my bills? That's a form of grief. And a lot of people don't realize what they're feeling after they've lost a job.
Mm.
Also, divorce, the loss of a relationship, that's also a form of grief. A health diagnosis. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor, gives you a diagnosis of, I should say, cancer, for example, or
Mm.
lupus or some other type of health diagnosis, you can grieve your health because as far as you know, you will never be the same after that health diagnosis. So people can grieve more than just the loss of a loved one,
Yeah.
the loss of your identity. So things change. Who am I after this, right? I talked a little bit about the loss of a job.
Mhm.
When most people ask you, who are you? We kind of lead with our titles, right? That's something we're proud of. We work to get to that point. But
Mm.
after you've lost that job, you start questioning, who am I without it? That's a loss of identity.
You
I
know,
don't
that's
know who I am beyond this.
that's really profound the way you said it, because I never really thought about job loss as a form of grief. And you're so right, because like some people, that is who they are. They walk into a meeting, or, and that is what they think they are, right? Is that job.
Mhm.
And then when that goes away, it's like, who am I? Like you're saying. Yeah. Wow. That's
Right.
a really good way to put it. Another thing I was going to ask you is that I know you work with women every day who are navigating grief. What is the most common thing you see in the people who come to you, the thing that they're carrying that nobody has named for them yet?
A lot of people that I work with, they suffer in silence. They truly feel like there's no one else going through what they're going through.
Mm,
And most people who are grieving, they feel alone.
mm,
They don't want to create a burden for anyone else or make anyone else feel uncomfortable or to bring them down by talking about their grief, their sadness. So most people keep to themselves, especially in those early days of grief. You don't feel comfortable talking to it about someone else or talking to someone else about what it is that you're going through.
mm,
So I would say most of the women that I've worked with, most of my clients, that's the first thing is like, I don't know who to talk to about it. Or maybe it's someone that, they can't identify somebody who's gone through a similar type of grief.
mm,
So they feel like I'm the only one who's going through this. So no one else will understand.
mm.
And they start to suppress those emotions, those feelings because they don't feel like they can talk about it
Yeah.
or they're making someone uncomfortable by talking about it. So a lot of times they suffer in silence, they suppress it, they keep themselves busy so they don't have to think about it or they don't have to talk about it. They
Mm,
rush themselves to just try to get through it or try to get over it because, want to
gone.
bring anyone else down.
Yeah, and life goes on if we're, if
Right.
we're being realistic too, right? Because, like, you feel like you can't really wallow too long because you
Right.
have to get right back to functioning. It's definitely a big juggling act, if I would say. Okay, so another question I have for you is, like, I know you talked about identity shifts a little bit earlier too, about shifts after loss, who you become when the person who knew you best is gone. Can you explain what that actually looks like for the people you've worked with in the past? Because I don't think people realize that grief not only changes how you feel, but also who you are, right?
Right.
Mhm,
So, when you're going through grief, things start to change. You may not feel as confident as you once were before.
mm,
You may not feel like the same person where you could just get up and, the happy person that you were, you're waking up sad or, you know, as I was explaining the health diagnosis your life changed. So you may not be able to just get up and be free to go how you used to.
yeah.
That's an identity shift, right? So you're having to navigate what does this new person look like beyond my grief? Who am I after whatever it is that I'm grieving?
Mm,
So when we talk about the health diagnosis, I'll use for an example my son, who was recently diagnosed with epilepsy,
mm. So sorry to hear that.
we're not able to move forward like we used to. We can't just be, spontaneous. We have to plan everything going forward. We have to make sure we have a plan. So, what that looks like for someone who's going through a recent health diagnosis, maybe things look different with your job. Maybe I'm not as confident as I was because everything that I knew was tied to me being this professional. So as I'm moving through life, maybe I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And I just know for myself, an example, um, during my grief journey early on, I didn't show up like the professional I knew I was, right? So that brain fog where I couldn't think as crisp as I used to.
Mm,
So, having to process that was very, very difficult during those very early stages of grief for me. But for me, I had to learn this is who I am going forward. How do I make the pivot or the shift or the changes? And it's not that you're trying to get back to who you were before.
mhm,
Moving on to who you are becoming after your grief is not necessarily a negative thing. And some people think of it could be something negative, right? Like I don't want to create a new person or to be somebody new. That's not a negative thing. You're learning how to move through this journey and discover who you are after everything you've been through.
mm. I love the way you said that. And I'm so sorry to hear about your son. That is just, uh, oof. Yeah, I can't imagine. Thank you for sharing that. There is so much pressure to be strong, to hold it together, to be okay, right? What do you want to say to the person who has been performing okay for so long that they don't even know how to stop? you know?
Yeah, and what I like to call that is a functional griever.
Oh,
So
I
many
love
of
that
us
term, a functional griever. Okay.
yes, and what that is, as you mentioned, as you're grieving, you're still doing all the things. You're going to work, you're showing up, you're fixing lunches, you're fixing dinner, you're keeping the household together. You're doing everything that you need to do to try to suppress those feelings and those emotions.
Mhm,
But what I will tell you is that grief will wait. It will wait you out. You cannot outrun it. You can't suppress the emotions. You can't suppress the feelings because it'll show up when you least expect it. So, being the strong one, being the one that everyone comes to when they need something, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of us, we're the ones that keep the family together when there's events. Typically, moms, we're getting everything all together, making sure everybody has everything they need, the doctor's appointments, etc. But you don't allow yourself the time to slow down to process what you need to process.
mm,
That's a functional griever.
yeah.
You're so
I
used to being strong, but you need support too.
Yes. I love that you actually gave it a term because I think I am a functional griever myself. Um, I think most of us are in some way. We have phases of that too. For me, I remember I was sitting in a meeting one time and it was a project that I had been working on for some time and it was just a status update. And I'm sitting in the meeting and this lady just asked me, "So, how are you?" And instantly I just started bawling. Like, that was
Mhm.
not planned, not intended, definitely not in that meeting, but like you said, grief will wait for you. Like, if you keep pushing it down the road and saying, "Ah, I'll deal with that later, I'm okay," sometimes it just shows up and, it's important to take care of what that is, right, for yourself. So thank you for giving it a term. I'm gonna take that back and say, "Oh, I've been functional." But
Right.
it's not a badge of honor by any means, but it's certainly something that I think now I will have to reflect on now that you've named it. Thank you for that.
Right, yeah, it's definitely not a badge of honor to carry,
Mhm, mhm,
and, over time, as you're continuing to suppress those emotions, like you said, in your meeting, it just showed up, and the least, expecting moment that, "I'm in a meeting, why is this happening now?" And as you continue to push on, it will show up in moments where you're least expecting it, so it's best to be honest with whatever it is that you're grieving,
mhm,
um naming your grief, a lot of people just think that they're sad, that they know it's the primary grief, right? Let's just say the primary grief is maybe grieving the loss of a mom,
mhm,
but you're also grieving not being able to call your mom. That could be a secondary grief. So, understanding what your grief is, giving it a name. I like to tell my clients to start by naming your grief because so many people don't know what they're actually grieving.
mm.
They're grieving one thing, but it's layers. Grief has layers.
Oh my gosh, you're hitting such a nerve right now, Shannon. This is good. Um, Give it a name. Wow. I have never really thought about it that way. I really have not. So, oh, I feel like I'm gonna cry here now. Okay. The timeline pressure. I have heard this many, many times where people give grievers timelines they didn't ask for. Oh, it's been 6 months. Oh, it's been a year. Why are you still sad? How do you
Mhm.
help someone push back against those pressures without losing the relationships around them, you know?
Right. Well, first I say grief does not have a timeline, right? Grief does not have a timeline. It could be year 2, 3, 8, 10, and you're still grieving the loss of a loved one or whatever it is, whatever form of grief that you're grieving. Grief does not have a timeline. Also, set boundaries.
Mm,
So if you are not ready to talk about it just yet, set boundaries, especially with loved ones, because most people will say things, you know, It's not bad with bad intentions, but most people don't really know what to say or how to talk to someone who's grieving. They wanna be helpful, but sometimes the things that they're saying could come off as being dismissive. So understanding how to set boundaries, right? So if you're not ready to answer questions about your loved one, if you're not ready to share more, if you're not ready to talk about the details yet, setting boundaries, just letting them know. It doesn't matter if it's been a month,
Mhm.
a year, 5 years. That was my person. I love them. They matter to me, right? And there's no timeline on getting past that point or getting over it. So just letting them know, this was my mom, my dad. I'll never get over them no longer being here.
Yeah.
Grief doesn't have a timeline.
Yeah. I so agree with that. And I'm so glad that you shared it in the way that was so beautifully put. Um, I agree. I very much agree.
Yeah, and just go at your own pace, right?
Yeah.
Just let them know, "I'm taking this at my own pace,"
Mhm.
um, because there isn't a set date that you can say, "Okay, by this date, I'll be okay."
Yeah.
Maybe not responding right away. If someone, whether it's text message or phone call, maybe not responding right away, but letting them know, "I appreciate you, for checking on me, but I'm taking this at my own pace, at my own time."
Yeah. I like that. I really like that. So I think a lot of people believe that healing means getting over it, moving on, and not crying anymore. Like, what does healing actually look like in your experience for the women who you work with?
Yeah, so the women that I work with, I use the word healing very lightly,
Mm,
and I like to say rediscovering joy after loss.
mm,
So, what does that look like for you? What makes you happy? Smiling without feeling guilty about smiling or being happy. So when I talk to my clients, when I meet with them, what does that look like for you? What does joy look like for you after the loss of your loved one? And doing it without feeling guilty about it. So I like to call it rediscovering joy after loss.
Oh, I love that. You talk about that a lot on your platform, and I've heard that sentence, rediscovering joy after loss. And I think a lot of people who have lost someone who's very close to them feel like joy can be a betrayal. Like, if I laugh today, am I somehow forgetting my loved ones? How do we help someone who is feeling that way just to give themselves permission to feel joy again?
Yeah, like, as you said it, giving yourself permission, right?
Hmm.
To to heal, to find what makes you happy.
Hmm.
What are some things that you enjoy doing? Maybe it's even some things that you enjoy doing with your loved one, right? Slowly getting back to maybe doing those things. Maybe you can find a way to honor your loved one. So if it's around a holiday, maybe creating a certain ritual or tradition that you can honor your loved one. So you're still doing those things that make you happy, that brought you joy, even though your loved one is no longer here. But how can you maybe honor them in the process? And then going forward every year doing this one thing. Maybe it's starting an angel tree, right? So if you love to decorate your Christmas tree with your loved one, they may not be here anymore, but what can you do to honor them? If that's something that brought you joy, maybe an angel tree every year in honor of your loved one. So doing those things that brought you joy, you can continue to do those, but maybe coming up with something that you can honor your loved one in the process of why you're doing it. So being able to rediscover what joy looks like after loss.
Mm, yeah. I think that's gonna be hard for a lot of people, especially for those who have close loved ones that they've lost, because that
Right.
guilt is a real thing. I've spoken with a number of people who've lost loved ones. I have a friend who recently lost her husband about a year ago, and I know just through talking to her that she has not rediscovered that joy again, and it's gonna take time. you know? It's like you said, grief has no timeline, and it's just hard
Right.
to juggle that. She has little ones, 3 young kids, and her husband passed away so young, and it's
Mm.
just such a heartbreaking story, and, ugh, I hope you're listening to this episode. You know who you
Yeah, well, I'm
are.
so sorry
Yeah.
for the loss of your friend's husband. And like you
Yeah.
said, grief doesn't have a timeline. And what joy looks like for one person could be different for another,
Mm,
right? So if they enjoy doing things as a family, maybe somehow still creating those memories and those moments for her babies
mm,
and also honoring dad in the midst of it.
yeah.
So, that could be joy after loss, right? Recreating those moments. This is something that dad loved to do. And every year we're going to go and take this family trip and we're going to, write dad's name in the sand. And they love going to the beach. Every year we're going to go and we're going to write dad's name in the sand and we're going to take a picture with it. So he's always here with us.
Mm,
That could be rediscovering what joy looks like after loss. Dad may not be there, but how can you continue to bring him along with you, right? Remembering, honoring dad, and making and continuing to make those memories for the babies, right? It could be going to the beach, writing dad's name in the sand, and taking a family picture and making that a tradition every year that we do this.
mm. I love that. I will say that it's tough to try to move on to a new normal. And,
Right.
I know for a lot of people, that is the struggle is like we said earlier, it's like, what's that balance, right? Like, you don't want to seem like you've moved on so fast, you don't want to move on too slow, but you also wanna do what's right for you and your family in the moment, and it's very, very
Right.
difficult to really strike that balance. I know for me, one of the things that I've struggled with, and I still do, is going to the grocery store. Because every time I go to the grocery store, there's a particular type of bread that my mom loved, and I would get that for her every time I went to the grocery store. So it's can you imagine, like, going to the grocery store, you have all these different types of bread, and I get to that aisle, and I always have to just like, take a deep breath and then exhale because I'm like, "Okay, I don't need to buy this bread anymore because it's not really bread that I liked." She was the only one that really liked it. So, it was just hard because, and it still is for me when I go to the store, I just have to sort of remind myself that, "Okay, yes, I don't have to buy the bread anymore, but I can still be in this aisle and be okay with being in this aisle." You know? And so, how like, do you hear that from some of your clients at all? Like, what is that? I know you have a name for everything. Is that still the functional griever?
So those are called triggers,
Oh,
and
okay.
you are recognizing what your triggers are. So going to the grocery store, seeing this type of bread, that's a trigger.
Mm,
It could be, riding past, a certain neighborhood. That could be a trigger for someone. The smell of your loved one's cologne or perfume, that could be a trigger. So understanding what those triggers are.
mhm,
And if you're in your early stages of grief, you may not know what it is yet until you actually come across it.
mm,
So, understanding what those triggers are, allowing yourself to process that moment, right? Maybe it's taking a pause, taking a breath, and just allowing yourself to process that this is a trigger.
mm,
It could be a phone call that takes you back to that moment. If it's, a health diagnosis, you remember the phone call when the doctor called and gave you the news, right? So those are triggers. Understanding what your triggers are and just knowing that they will continue to show up in your life over time. And it's how you handle, how you process that moment in the moment.
mm,
So, taking a breath, the grocery store, as you mentioned, is definitely a trigger for a lot of people. Maybe your mom enjoyed baking cakes and pies, and you can't just seem to find yourself to go down that aisle anymore. Or, like you said, it could be the bread. It could be anything that could be a trigger. It's different for anyone or for different people. It could be a song on the radio. I know for me, it was a song that my aunt would sing over and over and over again during her last days. And every time I would hear that song on the radio, I would get so emotional and I would just have to turn it off. I couldn't listen to it.
Mm,
And over time, I knew that that was a trigger for me. But as time went on, I knew it was a trigger. I was able to kind of meet it head on. I would take a pause, I would take a breath. I knew that was a trigger for me. But over time, it brought back, memories, and I would think of the good things and the good memories that I had with my aunt. So understanding what your triggers are,
yeah.
and over time, I I use it lightly, but over time it gets easier and easier because now you understand what that trigger is and you learn how to handle each trigger differently.
Mm, I like that. So, do you feel like people ever really get back to who they were after a loss, or do you find that they're just a new version of themselves?
I would say it's almost a new version. So healing,
Mm,
it's not moving on, right? It's just learning how to live again, how to live differently after your loss. Um, and normalizing that it's okay that I may not be the same person that I was prior to the loss. And that's not necessarily a negative or a bad thing, right? Because love or loss is this love with nowhere to go, right? It's like you love this person,
yeah.
they're gone, and you know that they won't ever be back again, right? So you may find yourself not feeling like the same person that you were prior to the loss. And that's okay, normalizing that, giving it a name, but learning how to live and how to rediscover joy again, rediscovering who you are after the loss. I would say that it's a different process for each person. Each person may handle it differently. But I would say you're never the same person that you were prior to your loss.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. But I love the way you said it. Thank you. I want to make sure that our listeners understand the difference between what you do as a grief coach and what a therapist does, because I think sometimes people don't know which one they actually need. Can you just break that down for us, like in plain terms? Like, what is a coach and what's a therapist?
A therapist is more on the clinical side. They can diagnose you if there are any, mental health issues or concerns, write a prescription, medicine, etc. I am not able to do that as a grief coach. I can help you name your grief. I can walk you through, um, rediscovering what grief looks like on the other side,
Mm,
but I can't diagnose you. I can help you, like I said, name your grief. We can go through a framework to help you understand what it is that you're feeling. I can help you find support and community, but I'm not able to diagnose you. So
mm,
I would say that's the difference. The therapist is more clinical, where they can diagnose you. The mental health situation that, maybe there's a mental health component there and they can help you process that in a different way than I'm able to.
mm. Understood. Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. So, if someone is listening to this right now, maybe in their car, maybe they're folding laundry, they're driving someplace with the kids, and they have been carrying grief alone for a long time, what is the one thing that you'd want them to hear directly from you?
You are not alone. There is someone else who is grieving something very similar that you may be going through. Find support, find community. Community is so important when you're grieving because you don't have to suffer alone. Also, when you're ready, being able to tell your story, being able to talk about your loved one. That was a big part of my healing journey is being able to tell my story. That was healing for me. And I understand for some people, depending on what stage you are in your grief journey, you may not be able to talk about it right now because every time you talk about it, you start to break down and you
Yeah.
start crying.
Mhm,
Maybe you're not ready to fully talk about it yet. But as time goes on, I would say tell your story. You never know someone else that may need to hear it,
mhm.
how it can make an impact for someone else.
Yeah.
So, finding community, telling your story, giving yourself time, giving yourself grace,
Mhm,
allowing yourself to feel the emotions. Don't become a functional griever. Allowing yourself time to slow down and feel whatever you need to feel. Cry when you need to cry. All of that is okay.
yeah. I love that. I really love that. Thank you for sharing. I know that a lot of people listening to this right now are either dealing with grief, have dealt with grief, or at some point will deal with grief. Because we know that loss is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for everybody. And so, what I'm hoping we could also do with this podcast today is also put some tools in their toolkit, right? And help people understand how to cope with grief. So, as the person who's grieving, what are some things that you think we can put in their toolkit to help them with grieving? I know you mentioned naming your grief, finding community to support you, family, friends, and so on. But is there anything else that we could maybe add to help them cope with the grief?
Yeah, I would say journaling, also,
Ah,
seeing a therapist. I myself saw a therapist at some point during my own grief journey. I think it's important to get the help that you need. Being honest,
mm,
not only with yourself, but with others. So if someone asks, how are you? And you're not fine, being honest and saying, today is a hard day for me,
mm,
or I don't have the words yet, but I'm feeling a lot. So being honest not only with yourself but with others, because so many people want to help, they want to support you, but they may not know how. And I would say, giving others permission to help you.
mm.
But you have to be honest. Because if you're saying I'm okay,
Yeah,
I'm fine, that's what they're going to take, and they're going to, move on, and, they think you're okay because that's what you said. So I would say, just being honest with yourself and letting people know what you need, how to help support you.
yeah,
And if you don't want to talk about it, if you don't have the capacity, let them know. I appreciate you checking on me, but I just need some quiet time today.
yeah. Okay. Sounds simple. So I know that there are a number of people who have a stigma around therapy. And it's just one of those things that some just don't think they need, even though they might need it. What are some things you think in therapy that people can learn, or like what's the good thing about therapy? I mean, I'm sure there are many good things, but like what are the pros so that people understand that that is also an option and that they can give it a try, and not be so negative about it.
Right. And I think that comes from, what we talked about earlier is being the strong one, right?
Mm.
We think we got it all together. We don't need help. We can continue to push. If I just continue to work hard and continue doing all the things, all of this will go away.
Mm,
So I would say if it comes to a point where it's the way you're grieving is impacting your mental health. You're finding yourself not being able to get out of bed, not being able to take a shower, not talking to anyone. And I'm not saying, early on in your grief, maybe it's been months where you're just not able to get yourself together. I
mm.
would say you need to go and actually physically speak with someone, with a professional to help you process
Emotions.
these emotions.
Yeah. Mhm.
Taking care of your mental health. So if it comes to that point where you're not able to take care of yourself physically, that's when you need to reach out for help. And sometimes, just reaching out just to talk to someone, talk therapy, right? If you just want someone that you can talk to, and you don't feel comfortable talking to it with a family member or a friend, I would say reach out to a therapist and talking through whatever it is that you're trying to process, or a grief coach with processing whatever it is that whatever you're trying to process. They can help you understand what you're going through, right? They can help you name it.
Yeah.
Being able to name exactly what your grief is. As I mentioned, grief comes in layers, so you may think I'm grieving one thing, but once you start unpacking those layers, you find that there's all of those secondary losses that you're also grieving. So being able to process that with someone that can help you understand
Mm.
what you're actually grieving. Also, a therapist, they can help you set boundaries. A lot of times when you're grieving, you're not really sure how to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So being with someone that can help you process it, and giving you some healthy boundaries. I think, a therapist or a grief coach would be a perfect point of contact to help you set boundaries and just to understand what it is that you're feeling.
Mhm.
Like I said, a lot of us we try to show up and be the strong one.
Mhm.
We don't think we need help,
Yeah,
but the grief will continue to show up in the moments where you least expect it until you actually be honest with yourself and address it head on
and deal with it. Yeah,
and deal with it. Yes.
yeah. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now let's switch it to the person who actually wants to help. The friend, the coworker, the loved one who is wanting to support those who are grieving. How can they be better friends and better support systems to the ones around them who are grieving? Because I will say that for me, the grief journey has been one that I've had to embrace. That some days I am not okay, and some days I am. And thankfully, my husband has been very supportive and he's just great at just knowing the right things to say. But sometimes I don't want to burden him, right? On okay, I'm going through it again today. And sometimes I don't want to do that. But what tools can we put in the toolkit of those who are wanting to support, and so that they can be better support to those around them?
Right. Yeah. So being present, just know that you don't need to have the right words.
Mhm.
Uh, Most people don't know what to say to someone who's grieving, so they don't say anything at all.
Mm.
And sometimes silence can hurt more than actually helping. But just know you don't have the right words. Just letting them know I'm here. I don't have the words, but I care about you. Showing up with dinner. Everyone has to eat, right? So if there's someone who is, the loss of a parent or grieving, helping them with dinner. We all have to find, food. Even though you're still processing everything that just happened, you still have to eat, you still have to feed your family. Maybe
Yeah.
offering to purchase groceries or offering housekeeping services, right? We still have to keep our house clean. Maybe they don't have the energy to get up and clean their home. But reaching out and instead of just saying or asking, "Do you need anything?" or "Let me know what you need," actually doing some practical things that that this is what they may need help with, right?
Mhm.
Just a few of the things that I name, offering to Uber Eats or DoorDash them some dinner. Those are all of the things that people need. Maybe it's taking their kids to school or maybe taking their kids to the park just to give them an opportunity to be in the moment to process those emotions. So just doing the practical things that that you would need if you were going through a situation, right? Um, and not just asking or saying, "Let me know if you need anything," because 9 times out of 10, nobody's gonna reach out and let you know, right?
Yeah.
They're processing their grief. They're not sure what to ask for in the moment. And sometimes a lot of people, they don't want to be a burden on anyone else, so they won't ask. So just reaching out and actually taking the initiative to do things, run errands for them, and just show up without asking.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. I had a guest on one of the earlier episodes who said this exact same thing. Just nobody's going to pick up the phone and call you and say, I need help. So stop saying, let me know if you need help, and just do the thing. Do it anyway. Whatever it is that you want to do, bring food, like you saying, groceries, those are things that can certainly go a long way. And I think people underestimate that because a lot of people think too that they have to bring a lot of money or a lot of time or, like it's just the little things that even could even go a longer way sometimes, right?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And another thing I would say is remember those important dates.
Mm.
Whether it's an anniversary, the death anniversary, or birthdays, remembering those important dates and remembering to follow up with your friend or family member on those important dates, that goes a long way because usually after the funeral, most people kind of drop off with asking, you know, what can I do, etc. Right.
Mhm.
But remembering those important dates and on those dates, just reaching out to say, hey, just checking in. A simple just checking in, I was just thinking about you, that goes a long way. So, in addition to the other things that we just named,
Mm,
I would say those random text message or phone calls, "Hey, I was just thinking about you today. I'm just checking on you."
yeah.
That goes a long way.
Yeah, I love that. I never really thought about the one that you just said, which is remembering those dates, because you're right. After the funeral is done, everyone goes about their separate ways, and you are left with the burden of the grief to carry by yourself. And so you're right. I think remembering those dates and telling your loved one or whoever it is that you're thinking about them could mean a whole lot. So yeah, oof. This thing called grief is it's a
Yeah,
lot. It's a lot, but
it's a
it's
lot, and
yeah, it's
it's
a
so
lot.
many layers to it, and,
Yeah,
trying to unpack it could be a much longer conversation.
yeah, yeah. But I'm so glad we have someone like you here to help us understand what this is and how to cope and what tools we can put in our toolkit. So this has been very, very helpful. One thing that I do before I close every episode is I do something called the Shifted on Purpose move of the week. And it's where I ask my listeners to take an actionable step, very small, very intentional, to moving forward in their planning journeys, whether it's planning grief, relationships, or loss. And it's just really to say, what is that one thing you're going to do after listening to this episode? So maybe this week, the action step could be the one that you're always performing okay in front of, and just actually telling that person how you really feel. What do you think about that? Like, what is that a good shift on purpose move of the week for the viewers or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just reaching out to one person and just let them in just a little bit, right? You don't have to go into your whole story. Um, you don't have to tell your whole story, but just know that you don't have to carry it alone. So even if it's just reaching out and letting one person in just a little, I say that will go a long way. I would also add, maybe taking this week, maybe 5 minutes to name what you're actually feeling.
Mm,
Not just I'm okay or I'm sad. Go a layer deeper
mm.
and find time to actually name it. Name what you're grieving, what you're actually feeling. Think about your primary loss and then all of those secondary losses that comes with the primary loss. So I would say just take a 5 minutes of your day, of your week to name what you're actually feeling and then reaching out to one person and letting them in just a little.
Oh, I love that. Okay. All right. You guys heard it. Shifted on purpose move of the week is name your grief and find someone who you can share it with. Okay, wonderful. I love that. Hey, listen, thank you so much, Shannon. This has been amazing, not just for you being here. And once again, so sorry to hear about your losses. But thank you again for turning your pain into purpose and doing this work, for creating space where women and everyone really doesn't have to pretend, right? Our listeners are going to feel so seen by this conversation. And we are going to make sure that everyone knows how to find you. So thank you so much. This was great. Do you have any final thoughts or any last minute parting words before we wrap?
Thank you so much for having me. And, I hope your audience, they take away some of those things that we talked about today. And the biggest thing is you are not alone.
Mm,
Reach out, find community, find that support system. You don't have to navigate this grief by yourself.
yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shannon. This has been great. Have a great
Thank you.
rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.